All right, we're going to begin a new section on light. In this section, we'll review the major effect of light, including photosynthesis and photoperiod. All of the energy available to living things on this planet, well, except for a few minor thermal loving bacteria, comes from the sun. We'll begin by looking at the effect of light on growth rate of the plant through photosynthesis and how it affects the shape and plant development. The magic of plants is they can capture energy from the sun and produce sugars, releasing oxygen to the atmosphere. This process of photosynthesis allows life to occur on this planet. Photosynthesis is Greek for using light to synthesize or to create or put together something new, something physical. Plants, algae, and some bacteria can use energy from the sunlight to put together, to synthesize organic compounds, mostly sugars and carbohydrates. Only plants, green plants, and some bacteria can do this. Photosynthesis is important because it produces the oxygen we breathe, captures carbon dioxide, creates food, energy, and fibers. And maybe we ought to be more thankful. Chlorophyll is the pigment that makes plants green. It's found in the chloroplast in the cells of the leaf. Chlorophyll is responsible for trapping light energy from the sun and helping to create those sugars. Most of the chloroplasts are found in the palisade cells and the spongy mesophyll cells. Here's the chemical formula for photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere enters the leaf through the stomates. Water enters the leaf through the root system and travels up through the xylem. In the presence of energy, this indicates sun's energy, it produces sugars. Here's a 6-carbon sugar, releases oxygen, and releases water. Carbon dioxide is plentiful in the air and enters the plant through the stomates here. And most of the stomates being in the bottom of the leaf becomes involved in photosynthesis here in the palisade cells and the spongy mesophyll. The rate of plant photosynthesis is usually dependent mostly upon light. Carbon dioxide and water are rarely limited to plants. And as light increases, photosynthesis increases. This graph shows the absorption of different colors of light. Most of the light used by plants is in the blue range and in the red range. The red and the blue colored pigments affect photosynthesis. Green light is not used by plants, which is why plants are green. They reflect back the green light. White light is composed of a full range, a rainbow of different colors of light. Sunlight supplies the complete range of wavelengths and can be broken up by a prism, as you can see here. The blue and the red light, however, are the wavelengths that are used primarily by photosynthesis. When sunlight bumps into stuff, three things can happen. The photons of the light energy, they move in a straight line until they hit something. They can either be absorbed and often create heat, they can be reflected back, or they can pass through. But when they pass through something, they're often refracted or bent. Sometimes all three can happen at once. When light is reflected off something, we can see it. When it's absorbed, it turns into another form of energy, often heat, or in the case of plants, it turns into a chemical energy, sugar, through photosynthesis. Light can also be transmitted through an object, in which case it is generally bent. The same thing happens with a leaf. When light energy is absorbed by a plant, it's turned into heat or chemical energy, sugars. It can be refracted by bent by going through the leaf, or it can be reflected. If it's reflected, it's usually the green spectrum that you see most of. If you've ever been in a tropical rainforest, the light quality is really kind of weird. So much of the light is refracted or bent as it passes through the leaves above, and it creates a strange feeling. Most of the light used for photosynthesis is captured near the top of the canopy. Sun-loving plants will be found at the top, and shade-tolerant plants will be found down low underneath the other plants. Light not only affects the rate of plant growth through photosynthesis, more light being faster growth, it affects the shape of the plant as well. Plants that don't get enough light can become pretty spindly. The seedlings on the left are the same age as those on the right. Guess which one was grown in the dark? We optimize the light in the garden in several ways. This affects both plant growth rate as well as the shape of the plant. Plants are spaced in a field, whether it be the garden or a farm, to optimize for light. Here's a commercial lettuce field in South Texas where plants are spaced precisely just so far apart to allow the plants to grow, although there seems to be a few missing plants in here. Again, to optimize for light, we usually put the taller plants to the north end of the garden in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, we do exactly the opposite. And the final way to optimize for light is through pruning. Fruit trees are often pruned to remove the middle branches to let more light into the center of the tree. On the right, you can see a peach tree was in my garden, where I cut some branches out from the middle of the tree to open it up. And here's some peaches from the garden, not that same year. Sure, you can have too much light. Plants can be sunburned. This is common when you change the situation in the garden. Pruning trees in the middle of the summer to open up the canopy and allow more lighting can cause an abrupt change in energy and burn plants below. Too much light can cause a bleaching of leaves, where chlorophyll is destroyed due to high energy levels within the chloroplast, producing toxic reactions. This is common in plants that are first transplanted out into the field if they're not adequately prepared. High temperature can cause damage to plants through increases in respiration and heat stress. Increases in temperature increase metabolism up to the point of can be degradation. And high transpiration or water loss from plants can also be the result of too much light. Of course, in the northern hemisphere, we put our greenhouse on the south side of buildings, the sunny side. Here's a little greenhouse in Holyoke. Here's an interesting way to get plants out into the sunshine, putting them on rooftops. We're seeing more and more rooftop gardening these days, as it not only creates interesting places to work, but can grow food as well as cool the building. If there's not enough light, we can actually add high intensity discharge for specialty lamps in a greenhouse to grow plants. Here, clear plastic mulch captures sunlight to warm the soil early in the season. Young corn plants are just starting to appear underneath the plastic. Plastic needs to be taken off pretty soon to prevent young plants from burning. Plastic mulch will warm the soil and make plants really grow faster. The melons on the right were grown on black plastic mulch, which warmed the soil. The plants on the left had no plastic mulch and grew much more slowly. Clear plastic mulch warms the soil more than black plastic, but also helps the weeds to grow. Here's some melons here that are growing pretty well due to the clear plastic warming the soil. But the weeds are growing pretty well too. Black plastic mulch can be used to warm the soil enough to grow sweet potatoes in the north. Of course, it also helps keep the weeds down. These are grown on hills, so they don't get too wet when it rains. It makes it a lot easier to harvest the roots when they're grown up on hills like this. Straw mulch can also be used to cut down weed growth by blocking sunlight from the weeds, but it doesn't warm the soil as well as plastic mulch. In fact, it's generally cooler and wetter near straw mulch. The rhubarb doesn't seem to mind, however, here early in the season in my garden. So we've looked a little bit at the growth rate of plants, the photosynthesis, and the shape of plants. Finally, we're going to look at the development of plants and how they change through photoperiod. As days get longer or shorter, it can cause developmental changes in the roots like flowering, tuberization of potatoes, bulbing, and the like. Then we move on to photoperiodism, the length of the day and length of the night, and how it affects plant growth and development. Scientists initially thought that the day length triggered flowering and other responses in plants. They subsequently found out that it is actually the length of the night period that matters, but if we still call it photo period, we talk about short day plants and long day plants. We talk about short day plants. What we're talking about is a long night plant, and I'll show you why. Plants respond to length of day and night and changes in different ways. You can see the bean plant on the right at noontime has its leaves flat out, capturing the sunshine. No need to do that at midnight, and so the leaves are laying down more. These are called circadian rhythms, and they happen each day. Kind of a normal thing for many plants to do. There are also seasonal effects of day length. Timing of flowering, for example, is a common photoperiod response. Another is the change of leaf color in the fall. As days get shorter in the fall, leaves start to change on deciduous trees. There are others. We'll take a look at some. There are lots of developmental changes that you can see in plants that in response to the relative length of day and night. Chrysanthemum flowering, for example, potato tuberization and onion bulbing are several that we'll talk about. First, some definitions. Plants are categorized according to photoperiod response in three different categories. Long day plants, short day plants, and day neutral plants. Day neutral plants are those that don't respond to photoperiod. I'm going to stop apologizing when I say long day plant because you know when I say long day plant, what I really mean is a short night plant. A long day plant is one that responds once the day length exceeds some critical period. It may exceed 8 hours, it may exceed 10 hours, it may exceed 16 hours. But the key is that the period of light needs to be longer than some key photo period. Short day plants are plants that respond when the day length is less than some critical photo period. We often manipulate photoperiod in order to stimulate flowering. For example, chrysanthemums normally flower in the short days of spring or fall, but you can get them to bloom in midsummer by covering them with a cloth that completely blocks out the light for 12 hours. After several weeks of this treatment, the artificial dark period no longer is needed, and the plants will bloom as if it was short days of spring or fall. In long days, the poinsettias will mostly be green as the plant on the right. In order to force them to start to turn color and make red leaves, they're given short days. I've seen these plants in Mexico where they stay red all the time because of the short days. Here's some long day plants that flower as the days get longer: spinach, sugar beets, and some flowering plants. The actual length of the necessary photoperiod will vary among species and even with among varieties within a species. The key is that they only respond once the day length exceeds a critical number of daylight hours. The critical photoperiod may actually be as short as 9 hours, as long as 14 hours, but the key is that the days have to get longer than some critical photoperiod or shorter than some critical night period. Here's a few short day plants. These plants flower when days get shorter than some critical photoperiod. The one on the bottom left, tobacco, is one of the plants that a lot of the early research was done on. Potato tuberization is a short day response. Potato plant grows vegetatively early in the summer. Then as the days begin to get shorter in late July and August, the tubers begin to form, as you can see on this plant on the left. The flowering of corn and the flowering and fruiting of cucumbers are not affected at all by the length of the day. These plants will be called day neutral. So next we're going to ask, so how does this work? In this model, we have a period of light that's relatively short and a period of light that's relatively long. You can see that this plant is flowering, suggesting this plant is a short day plant because the period of light needed to be shorter than some critical photoperiod. We can adjust the photoperiod to affect plants. We can create short days by covering the plants with a black shade cloth from 7 p.m. to 8 a.m. Or we can create long nights by turning the lamps on in the middle of the night, sometime between 2 a.m. and 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. to break up the long night. These are ways that we affect photoperiod in greenhouses. Remember, poinsettias need short days or long nights to turn red. So that silver shade cloth right here is pulled over the plants um, to create a long night or a short day period. This happens about October, so the plants turn red by the Christmas holidays to be sold. Fall color is triggered each year approximately the same time because trees respond to day length. As the days get shorter, the green chlorophyll begins to break down and the red and yellow pigments are more prominent. Photoperiod is the trigger that tells these plants it's time to get ready for cold weather. So if you've come this far in the video, good for you. I'll give you the answer to a test question as a reward. A day neutral plant, a plant that does not respond to photoperiod, is most likely indigenous to the tropical regions because in the tropics, day lengths don't change very much. So if you see a test question that says something along the lines of a day neutral plant is most likely indigenous to what region of the world, you can answer somewhere near the equator.